This is the Canon R7. I was pretty lucky. I got down to my local camera shop and got my name on the list, and I was first on the list. And they actually got the cameras in this week, and we're able to get them out today on the ship day on Friday. So now, do a quick review, initial review. And this is just going to be a quick review. This is going to be just my initial thoughts on this camera, and go through the pros and cons I had in the last video before I ordered it, and for just initial thoughts, see if it holds up to that. And in the next few days, the next couple of weeks, I'll have a lot more in-depth videos on the buffer size. How's that working? How's the APS-C working? How's the ISO? How much noise is in it, low light? All those things, all those worries we had about the camera, and all the things we thought were good about it. The autofocus, the processor, all those things. So let's get into it. All right, guys, when you get a new camera, the first thing you want to know is, how does the thing feel? How does the camera feel in your hand? I've got a couple friends that the reason they picked up the camera model they did and the camera brand they did was it was the one that felt best in their hands, so that's what they went with. To each person, that's your main criteria. That's good, and I can understand that. If it doesn't feel good, the Sonys don't feel horrible, but they just don't feel as comfortable because I ran a Canon for so long. I'm used to the Canon body. The Nikon doesn't feel as foreign as the Sony does to me. But again, if you had a Sony for a while, it's going to feel natural, and this is going to feel not natural. But it feels really good in the hand. As far as size goes, it is a touch lighter than the R5, but the R5 has more metal than this R7 has in it. It is a little narrower on the width and just a touch on the height. Not a big deal. The eyepiece does stick out farther, which I do like, because that means you're not bumping your nose as much against the screen as I could do with the R5. But yeah, it feels really good in the hand. So for that, it's got a good check mark. The big question we all had was about the button layout. What the heck? What's going on here? Why did Canon change it? I don't know. Right now, it's just a muscle memory game with me. So the way I have my R5 set up is this roller, the standard one, that's my shutter. There's a roller here on the R5. The on-off button is on this one, and that's my ISO. You're starting to see my problem that I had today a couple times. And then at the bottom down here, there was this scroll, which was my aperture. But usually with the aperture, I would set that through the Q button. How I have this one set up is same place for the shutter speed. I moved my ISO to the new little scroll wheel. And for the aperture, I'll just hit that through the Q menu. Now, the Q menu is moved from next to the info button down here to the D-pad. This is a pure D-pad, just like you think, and it works just like your PlayStation or Xbox controller. It's a D-pad. So, twice today, like I said, I've only had this 4 or 5 hours to mess with and play with it. When I was set up to this, I'm on the subject I am, and something moved. I want to change my ISO. I turned the camera off because I'm used to having my thumb right there, muscle memory. My shutter looked good. I thought, oh, my ISO is not enough. Let me crank it to the left because I need to decrease my ISO, and that's off on this dial. And then later, did the opposite. About an hour later, when I'm using this thing, I just wait for the woodpeckers because they come and go because they're feeding babies right now. So the woodpecker comes back, swing the camera up to my eye. I say, it's not enough ISO, I need more. I went to crank it to the right, turned the camera to video. So twice, but 4 or 5 hours, I only did it twice, that's not bad. So how do I overcome this? How am I getting my muscle memory? Well, what I'm doing is, just like I had to learn with the 5D and the R5 about how to set that up when I'm using it if I thought I needed it. The R5, not as much because you had to chimp, you had to look at what you did. But if you got it up there and you noticed the light change, you knew you may want to move it to stop one way or the other. Is the same way with that one, is to get your finger set before you start taking the picture, before you pull it to your eye. So after a while, instead of my thumb over here, I started putting my thumb on the edge of that dial. That dial feels different because now you're having to go up and down instead of right and left. So there's muscle memory. So it took me a while to start getting used to that. And a couple times when I'm there, I was a lot slower changing that ISO than I meant to be. And a couple times I had to really think about where's the ISO button? It's not, because I could feel that little notch where the on off video button is. I knew I wasn't there, so I go to that left. So I'm a little slower there, but for the most part, I was sitting fairly stationary, and the light in the trees changed a little bit. So a few times I needed to change the exposure. If the adults were there, the exposure a little differently than if the babies were poking their head out. But I started getting it after, like I said, after 4 or 5 hours of playing with this, I started getting used to that button setup. The dial on the top is the same as the R6. I'm used to the R5, so not too much. It's going to stay in manual all the time. If I need video, I just hit the video button or flip it over to video. Not a big deal. Your rating button's gone on this one. Never used it anyway, so good addition to throw out. Flippy screen, fine. Just same as the R5. I did see some reviewers griping about the EVF and the LCD, like it wasn't enough megapixels or something, but I'm not noticing any problem with it. To me, it looks fine. I can see the bird, and what I was photographing most this morning was a woodpecker that's not maybe 5 inches long, and little babies sticking their heads out that's maybe an inch, and I'm not that close to them. I'm using the full, 360 this thing's producing me. Wait, is that right? No, 280, excuse me. So the full 280 to 720, and to get them, and they're still not small, it's big in the frame, and not a problem. What I can see through the viewfinder and the LCD looks great. There may be a little more pixel density in the other one, but I'm not noticing a problem with the EVF. It looks good to me. What else changed in here? Yes, so the hot shoe. The hot shoe is going to be a little bit of a problem for me, maybe. Again, only 4 to 5 hours of the camera, so everything I say is initial, talking points. This thing, hot shoe, has little connectors in here for using like mics and things like that without having to put wires, around to the front or into the side for the mics or whatever. Even like maybe shutter releases, things like that. I took the hot shoe off to put my Atomos on here just to hold it to do some recording of the autofocus that I'll show you here in a bit. And I put it back on there, and this could have been me. Maybe I didn't put it on good, or maybe it got bumped when I was sitting in the passenger seat of the truck and I set a tablet or something on top of it. But I've noticed when I got out here, it's not on here. I remember putting it back on there. Why is that a bit of an issue? Well, if it's inclement weather and it rains, like it does up here a lot, I've got a buddy that does bear tours, and he was asking me about the R5, and it doesn't have this type of issue. He said, does the R5 have that? He said there was, I can't remember what brand it was that has the same type of hot shoe. I don't know if it was a Sony or something, but 2 cameras last season got fried because they didn't have the cover over it, and it got wet and it fried the whole camera. That's third-party information, but I can see that being a problem here if this did get wet. That's why they have a cover for it, so you don't get stuff in there and get it wet. What I'll probably do is order a bunch of extras for this, 3 or 4 of them. I'll keep some gaff tape, and I'll probably have this thing gaff taped up here and try to keep it as dry as I can, just to be safe. Yeah, that is mainly everything. Like I said, the battery's the same as the other battery in the R5, which is awesome, so I don't have to worry about batteries. All the other button layouts are pretty much the same, not a problem. Like I said, this new D-pad and the new where this button is, yeah, I wish I'd left it the same, but it's muscle memory, and I'm already getting used to how it's set up, so I don't see it being really that big a problem. Lenses, I only have 2 RF lenses right now. It's 1435 f4 and the 500, the little nifty 50. That's what I've got, and yeah, that's the 2 RFs I have. They work fine, of course, which you knew they were. This is the 7200 EF lens, version 3. Adapted this thing, working great, flawless. I love it. I hooked up the 500 f4. It ran great too. Looks just as good or better than the R5 does using it. So far, adapted lenses are working great with this thing. They're not a hitch on it, which I didn't think there would be, but you never know. But so far in the initial testing I've done, they work great. On to the AF, the autofocus. I will just say this, my initial opinion, the first 4 or 5 hours I've used this autofocus system is better than the R5, a lot better. And that's because they put in this $1,500 camera the same autofocus setting that's in their $6,500 R3. The only thing it does not have that I've seen that the R3 has versus this one, of course, is the eye, which most photographers, wildlife I've seen, it's not a big deal. They don't use it anyway. The other part is a recall custom setting. Now, this may have a way to do that, but I haven't figured it out yet. But again, I've only had this 4 or 5 hours, so this is just my initial, you know, hit the buffer, find out what the buffer did, find out what the autofocus looks like, go out and shoot some real world scenarios of what I could just find something real quick to shoot. But that autofocus is much better. Why is it better to me? One, it feels stickier, and that's just a feel thing right now. Second thing is how it autofocuses. So if you have your camera set up to be corner to corner of the viewfinder, like with the R5, same way. When the R5, when something flies in, you hit the autofocus button, it'll grab that subject as it's going through. With the R7 and the R3, you have it corner to corner. When something flies in, if you haven't even hit the autofocus button, it's going to put a little white box on the subject that it thinks you want to see going through the frame. So it'll put a little white box on there as it sees it. And then what it's telling you is this is the subject I think you're interested in, and this is the eye I think you're interested in. So it'll grab it. Now, if you got 2 or 3 birds going through the screen, it's going to grab the one, just like the R5 hit the autofocus. It's going to grab the one that it thinks you want. Same way with that little white box. And then if it's good, then hit the autofocus button and grab it. Now, you can do the same thing. You know it's going to come in the frame. You can hit the focus. It's going to grab straight through just like the R5. But it's really cool that it gives you that box telling you what it's focusing on. And why do I think that's even more important? Is if you've got more than one animal in the frame, if you got the full thing set up, it's going to be harder to tell it which to jump to. But what you can do with this is you can set custom areas up, or set standard areas up, zones, like what's always been on the R5 and all the other cameras, little zones. But you can create a custom area. You can say, I want this box to be this tall and this wide, and that's a box that'll draw. And then you can move that box anywhere you want on the frame. So let's say you have a slew of ducks, just 20, 30 ducks just sitting there all roosting, messing around. You can take your little, say you've got a box that's about a 1/5 of the size of the whole screen. I'm sorry, cottonwood fell on my face, freaked me out for a second. You can set that maybe to the left 2/3 over, because you're just concerned about that little group of ducks right there. So you can set on that group of ducks, and what that's going to do is any eye or head that it sees inside that box, it's going to put a little white box on the one it thinks you want. So you can narrow down the group of animals you want to look at. Or say you have, and I put a white box. Now, if it gets outside the box, it'll turn black, and it's basically telling you it's not going to focus outside of that little box you drew. So there's the catch there. But let's say you have 3 ducks, one on the left, one in the middle, one on the right. And you're really concerned about the one on the right. But when you pick your camera up, maybe for some reason the one on the left's a little closer to you, or just more exposed or something, and the little white box, or the Canon R5, you just hit the button, it's going to jump to that one. So you're kind of stuck with that one unless you change your autofocus method. And so the white box will say which one's getting hit. That's the good one, hit the focus button. What you can do is you can set that little area up, or you can set single point up. And I like the single point, because right now what I have set on this thing is I've got corner to corner like the R5, anything in the screen, that's what I want you to look for. Then I have the single point. So what I can do with that is whatever subject it sees that's closest to that single point. So if I have my point off to the left side of the screen, I got to remember left, so my right, your left. If it's on the left side of my subject, and if I have the single point to the left, it's going to grab that duck. If I've got it towards the middle, it's going to grab the duck that's closest from it, but I want the one on the right. So what I do is I move my camera or the focal point, that single point, closer to that duck on the right, and voila, it grabs the eye on that one over there closest to that one. So you can pick your 3 out real quick, and then after you do that, then you hit whatever focus button you're setting and hold it, and then you can recompose your shot. So you can move it over there, grab that duck, highlight it, reframe it however you want, whatever frame you want, and it's going to stay sticky on that duck. So you can choose the one you want. That was really cool to me, being able to do that. So that's why I think the autofocus is better than the R5 one, because you have that. But again, I still cannot believe that Canon put the R3 autofocus in this, not the R. I was expecting, the first talk for this, we're going to get the R5 focus trickle down to the R7, yada, yada. I did not think the R3 $6,500 autofocus system is going to go in their $1,500 camera. So that alone blows my doors off. It's just amazing. So again, in conclusion, after 4 or 5 hours using initial autofocus on this is a lot better than the R5, in my opinion. Now, for the big elephant in the room, the buffer. Everybody's wondering about that buffer. Our fears, don't worry about it. My opinion, that buffer is not an issue. Why? Okay, so at 30 frames per second, when I'm holding that shutter button down, consistently I get about 63 frames when I hit it down. And that's taking almost 3 seconds. So it's, I don't know if it's really 63, 65 is where it hits it. It'll go to busy. A few times I've been getting 75 plus. Now I don't know why. Is it maybe that there's less color information, so that file size is a little different? The file size should be the same every time. So I'm not sure why. Some of the times when I hold it down and hit it, I was getting about 4 seconds instead of 3 seconds. And average I get about 3 seconds with it holding that shutter down at 30 frames per second, which means you should technically get 90, but when I'm hitting the button and hitting that, I may be just a touch off. So it may be a little between 2.5 and 3 seconds. But 63 a lot of times, but a few times I was getting 70 plus before it went, said busy, and I'm done. So why do I think that's not a problem? Well, the thing is now that you have a sound, see if you can hear it. You probably can't, it's really quiet. With the electronic shutter, you can set a sound to electronic shutter. I have it set to 1 right now, which is the quietest you can get. I can hear it, but I don't think anybody else will be able to hear it, which is really cool. Because even when you're in 12 frames a second on the R5, most people don't hear the shutter going off. Now, if you're mechanical, you can hear it on the R5. But I'll get to the sounds on this in a bit. So since I can put a tactile sound to the shutter, with the R5 at 20 frames per second, I would miss shots because I thought I had that shutter button down, especially in the winter when you got gloves on, your hands are cold. You're putting that shutter down and you're lifting again because you'll hit the buffer at 20 frames per second on the SD card going longer. I haven't timed it, but you can't hit it. But I also don't want to fill my card up, so I don't want to be hammering that 20 frames a second forever. And I would get back to the house and I go through my pictures and I'm going, I missed part of that. How did I do that? It's because I was lifting the button or didn't have it down as tight as I thought I did, and I only got part of it. These tree swallows are driving me nuts because they're flying by me, just went above my head. They're going to this tree to my right, and it's just distraction, distraction, distraction. So yeah, feather it. So what I'm doing is, if you hold down to 1 to 2 seconds, what you can do, see if you can hear this. I'm not on the buffer. I'm shooting 30 frames a second. And that's how you get around that buffer. If you're only doing 1 to 2 second bursts and just kind of keep doing that and kind of let off just enough for that buffer to kind of be catching up, I didn't have a problem with 30 frames per second. Of course, I'm shooting a lot of pictures. I thought that was really cool. So I don't really see the buffer being that big an issue like I thought it was going to be. So maybe Canon does know what they're doing. I think they do. They put out some good products. But yeah, I can get 30 frames. I'm good. I'm there. I'm not having a problem. So the other 2 modes. So it has the 3 modes. Of course, electronic we just talked about. Now, I was under the impression by listening to people talk, because the guys that reviewed these with the non-production versions, there's only 2 people I saw, and that was Danny Connor and then Pangolin. I can't remember what they're a South Africa safari thing. They're the 2 that only wildlife people that I saw that actually had the pre-production copies. Everybody else was multi-shooters. They shoot everything from street photography to wildlife to cars, whatever. They're only 2. I got the impression from listening to all those folks that you're going to get 15 or 30 silent, and I'm not finding that. Electronic's the only thing I can find silent. So let's go through the modes. So electronic we just talked about, which is 30 frames per second, silent, or you can give it a shutter sound, which is really cool. Now that I can hear that, I can do my feathering with everything. The next up is electronic first curtain. It is louder than the R5 by a little bit, but it does shake a little more, and it is a hair louder, but it's 15 frames per second. Mechanical, almost sounds like a Nikon. It's a joke to all my Nikon guys. It's a lot louder. It's really noticeable louder. it is a lot louder than the R5 in mechanical. But again, you're shooting both those 15 frames per second. So, on electronic, if you hold the shutter down for about 3 seconds, it will go saying busy, you're locked out for 8 seconds or whatever it takes for that buffer to clear. If you're shooting mechanical or electronic first curtain, you get about, I'm getting about 147, 145 shots before it starts. It doesn't go to busy, it just slows the speed down, probably 7, 10, I don't know what it's slowing it down to. But you can notice it goes, it's hammering at 15, then it drops down. And I was really running about 147, so I'm guessing about 140, 145 is what you're gonna get. And 10 seconds on that burst before it starts to slow down. But again, I don't think the buffer's a problem. And that's, again, my opinion. You guys the mileage may vary for you guys. But like I said, I was shooting those woodpeckers, feathering it. They're going in and out, and I did not have a problem. Synopsis on the buffer, to me, not a problem. I'm really, really happy that being able to feather that I could get a 2-second burst a couple times. So, because I'm getting about 3 seconds before I hit that wall, or 2.5, whatever. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. That's been basically the really quick review of my 4 or 5 hours of use of this thing this morning. Like I said, the guys at Stewart's Photoshop, they did a great job. Bill and those guys, I got early on the list. I was the first guy on the list. They called me and said, hey, you can get your camera first thing Friday. So as soon as they were open, ran down there, grabbed my camera, ran to the house real quick, got it out of the box, got it kind of initial setup, ran out, looked for the woodpeckers and everything else, little ducks and stuff I could find. Spent about 4 hours with this camera to get this video out to you guys today, just to get the initial, what I found of it and what I've thought about it so far. And my synopsis, is this any good? The Canon do all right? Is this any good for wildlife photography? Yeah, it is. This thing is awesome. 30 frames per second. If you feather that, you won't hit the buffer. I mean, you can sit there all day long, just boom, 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 just keep 1 to 2 second burst and get it all. Autofocus, my Lord. I cannot believe they put the R3 autofocus in this thing at $1,500. It's a banger. It grabs, it's sticky. Like I said, right now, I think it's better than my R5 for autofocus, hands down. Other people may find different varying miles with that, but for right now, with the first 4 or 5 hours, this is a lot stickier, because I was using it back and forth just briefly with the same shot, same angle, same light, same everything, and I was getting a little better hit rate with this guy. Now, both of them are hitting awesome. 4,000 ISO as far as I pushed this today. Image still looks good. Now, the problem is DxO that I use in my workflow. I do DxO, then to Lightroom. They don't have a profile for the R7 yet. I emailed them, got a response back. They said it's on their list, they're working on it. They'd let me know when it was out. So yeah, guys, I'm extremely impressed with this. I knew I was probably gonna be happy with it. I thought it was gonna be a good camera, but at $1,500, I wasn't expecting a lot of the things this delivered to me. The frames per second, the shutter speed being, because I was really thought, well, that 30 frames per second, I'll never be in it. Like I said in the last video, I'll be at 15. I'm shooting 30 frames per second all the time with this. As long as I'm 1 to 2 second burst and I'm taking it off for briefly, as you've heard before, but I'm rattling off, rattle off, rattle off. I can go all day long with this buffer. It's awesome. The image quality so far has been phenomenal. I think it looks as tack sharp or a little tacker sharp than the R5, and that may be because I think this autofocus is working a little bit better and staying where it needs to be on the bird. But again, it's got more of that R3 processing and things like that, so I think the contrast looks a little better to me. Now, again, I've only used it 4 or 5 hours, so that's just my initial looks at thought of it. And I haven't been able to process through. I got the raw files, that's it. I haven't done anything to them. I just basically put them on the computer and that's it. Expect a lot more videos in the next 2 weeks over this guy. Everything, shutter, ISO, performance, the autofocus, all that. Look forward to it. So guys, thank you for watching. Subscribe. Leave me some comments, tell me what you think. Tell me what you want to see, what you want to know out of this thing, because I'll go test that and make a video for you and answer your questions. I'm trying to hit everybody in the questions. Black Hawk helicopter, hang on. on a second. A lot of military bases in Alaska, so we have F-22s, Blackhawks, all kinds of stuff. That was a Blackhawk flying over. I don't know where he's going. He's heading towards Whittier. Big mountain between here and there. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Leave me some comments. Tell me what you want to know about this camera. Tell me what you'd like me to test. Tell me where you think I went wrong with my initial 4 to 5 hour touch of this camera. But expect a lot more videos coming out soon, and the more feedback you get me about what you want to know about this camera, the more I can, test this. Because you guys are going to come up with some ideas that I didn't think about. But yeah, until next time, guys, get outside, take some pictures, enjoy your day, and 4th of July is coming up, so enjoy your holiday. You take care.